Hello again. So this is part 2 on my little video set about homemade potting mixture. And in the first one I talked about what it is and how to make it. And then I thought I would go ahead and go over real quickly how I use it in day-to-day working in my garden. And the first one that I described was the seed starting mixture, and it has all worm castings, and that's what I use in the little cell trays, the little seed starting pots. You can use it in peat pots, you can use it in nursery trays. This is a whole line of nursery trays that I'm using it in. And then when you go to use it in the containers, you should feel more than free to take half of those worm castings out and substitute it with half regular mushroom compost or something, which is a lot cheaper in price than earthworm castings. And as a matter of fact, you could probably use all compost rather than earth castings, just because it can get pretty expensive to use the castings. And as long as the compost is clean and high quality and aged as much as it can be, then it's probably just fine to use in containers. I'm just against using soil in containers, and I don't think that I would use manure, like an animal manure, but obviously you can use whatever you have on hand and see how it works out for you. And so for the seed pots, the nursery trays, this is how I fill them. I just usually use like this 3.5-inch nursery pot. And you can either use a shovel. I don't have any mixed up right now. It's all in my containers, and I'm in the process of hydrating more coir to make some more. So we'll just use what I have in here, which is a nice little container that will be growing lettuce and stuff like that. And so we'll just pretend that this is the seed starting mixture, which is all worm castings. Okay, so we're just going to make believe. And you can either use a little shovel, pour it in, or you can scoop it up. However you do that, you want to fill it over the top, and then just take it and wiggle it back that way, and then I sometimes turn it and wiggle it that way, and I just make it even with the top. And if you're working inside, and if you want to, you can set it on your table and just, I do that sometimes. I'm not banging it, I'm just barely letting it fall down, and you can see it just drop just a little bit. And then of course once you water it, it will shrink as well. And then these are my containers, and I use the seed starting mix in pretty much all of my containers for all of my crops. I use it indoors for my house plants, and I use it in big, small containers for my food crops outdoors. And let's see. Oh, and you can use it when you're starting seeds. You can also use it in little paper pots too. These are like homemade versions of the peat pot, you know, because I'm trying to cut down on peat usage, and I had a bunch of these old paper bags. They're plain, there's no writing on them or anything. And so I took a little jar and created these little pots for the plants that don't like to have their roots disturbed, like these are nasturtium, and they don't like to be transplanted, like neither does cilantro. And I found that I don't really like to have to deal with it when I'm going to transplant it, because I had to tape it, and I would like to take the tape off. So this isn't the best solution in the world, but it's pretty environmentally friendly and everything, so whatever. I'm not sure if I'll do that again, but I wanted to try that this year. Okay, and so, yeah, I use it in all different types of containers, and what I do usually, because this stuff is pretty fine, and you have to make sure that you have drainage holes in the bottom of your container. So what I do so that the container mix doesn't fall through the holes, I just take old window screen and cut it up, and like in a big container like this, I would I don't know if I'd cut that one in half. No, I wouldn't be able to cut that one in half, but like I have all different types of screen laying around in different shapes and stuff. I have scraps and I have whole pieces and I have it on the roll and whatever. You can cut it in a circle and fit it right down into the bottom. The point is just to cover up those holes so that your mixture doesn't go through. And then for something like this is an awfully big container. It's like 20 inches across, and it would cost a considerable amount of money to fill this thing. And so what I do with these great big ones is I take this rigid packing styrofoam that is not likely to break down or cause problems or anything like that. I just put that in the bottom. That's a little bit too big, and I'm not going to force it because it'll make too much noise, but you get the idea. You can break it up into pieces or whatever just to create some filler space down there, and we'll see how that works out. But you definitely want to do the screen, and in some of the pots that only have like one hole, like these pots only have one drainage hole, I'll just take little tiny scraps. I don't throw anything away. And screening is expensive, so I'll just take a little scrap and set it right down in the bottom of the pot, and then put the dirt, or the soilless potting mix to be exact. I'll take that and dump it right on top, and then that, because the hole down in this one is actually probably that big, so you definitely have to put some kind of screen or something down in the bottom. And before I got a hold of some screening, I used to put rocks strategically placed down in there so that it would block it, but it would let the water flow through. But I actually like to do the screen better. And so that's how I prepare the containers, and then I'll fill up the containers almost to the top. I do leave some space because I like to use the mulch on top of them as well as on my garden bed. But so I wanted to show you, when you're working with this stuff and it's bone dry like this, the easiest way to water it is to first start out by spritzing it. And you wouldn't believe what a difference this makes. Because if you were to just take your watering can or whatever and just pour the water in, it'll just start rising and floating to the top before it starts eventually soaking in. And that, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. And so whenever I'm working with this stuff and it's fresh, and see, this has been sitting around for a while, so it needs it. If you had just made up a batch and it was still moist because of the coir and the castings, then you wouldn't have to worry about that. You could just water it. You could just put your seeds in there and water it. But this is really dry, and so it just helps to spritz the top, and you can see the fluffy stuff flying, and it just wets it down. And it just makes it so that when you pour your water in there, it doesn't all float around and become a big mess. And you still have to water it carefully, of course, but this does help. And then I just wanted to show you real quick the results of some of the plants that I'm using in them. I actually use it. I didn't use it in the beginning with my tomatoes, and I used a soil-based potting mix, and it was a disaster. And like a month or longer after I had, after these guys were born, they were still really small, and it was horrible. They were just, I couldn't believe how bad they looked. And so I took them out of these individual, whatever they were growing in. I grow in whatever I can get my hands on. And so I took these guys out of the pot. I dumped the soil, and I very carefully just pushed the roots, and then the soil dropped off of it. And then I filled up probably right there with some of my new seed starting mixture, and I set the plant down in there, and then while holding the plant, I dropped in the rest of the potting mix up till there, and then I wetted it down, and probably a week later they were already growing pretty quickly. They had new growth. They were much healthier, and look at them now. I mean, like I said, I'm late. I don't know if I said that or not, but I think I did in one of these videos. I'm pretty late this year on my gardening, and so these aren't even as big as they should be, but they're still huge and so healthy compared to the way they were in that soil-based mixture. I will never go back to it again. Never, ever, ever. And these are all extras that will be given away because I started way too many seeds. And now I have tons more plants than I can use. And then this guy right here is my baby zucchini plant. And when I transplanted it, it was very healthy because I had started in here, but it was smaller, you know. And look at it. This has been a week or 2 weeks, and it's got flowers already. It's nice and healthy. It's very happy. And right now I just have window screen over the top of it to keep the animals from digging in it. But I'll probably go ahead and put a layer of mulch as well on top of it. And if you use mulch, if it's thick enough and you have animal problems, that may be all you need to deter them. But if they just push the mulch aside to dig, you might want to go to the lengths of putting screen or something in there. Okay? Well, I am about out of time. I just wanted to show you how well my plants like this soil-less potting mixture in their containers. And I hope this is of help to someone. Okay, bye guys.